Iowa officials have lost their way due to a deeply entrenched obsession with the transgender community. No longer are they able to focus on roads, crime, poverty, food scarcity, or comprehensive education. Rather, the obsession has spread to over half of the two legislative bodies who are pumping out bill after bill to attempt to calm their illogical fears about a small minority in Iowa who have caused no recorded harm in state's history. And yet, the obsessive focus has caused them to espouse their unfounded beliefs about people who embody a question of what it means to be a man or a woman, and to mischaracterize those of us who do so as an enemy of the state. Please give 5, 10, or as much as you can to support Iowa Safe Schools and their educational efforts to help these unfortunate leaders who have lost their way in hearing and serving the actual needs of the people of Iowa. The aforementioned state leaders have recently discovered the existence of gender outliers who have infiltrated and disrupted their presumed binary way of life. Gender diverse individuals have always lived in Iowa, but only recently were they discovered by our legislature. This cohort of experts were shocked when they first encountered a gender warrior had snuck into the Department of Vital Records and had the audacity to politely ask, in broad daylight, mind you, if they could amend their birth certificate. Upon discovery, and after recovering from the initial shock, officials opened an investigation. They interviewed thousands of current and former clerks of court. As part of this investigation, officials were again shocked to discover that these gender bandits had been in operation for at least as long as the oldest clerk of court they interviewed. In fact, every single clerk they interviewed told a harrowing story of legal forgery that enabled the gender border crossers to enter voting booths, to sail through airport security, and in the olden days to cash checks, all without being harassed, outed, or turned away. Lawmakers responded immediately to the investigative findings. One by one, they began to lob legislation aimed at stopping Iowa's transgender menace. In their first year, they successfully eliminated all transgender women from school sports. At this time, it was not known that transgender men existed or the threat they might pose to cisgender men who would have to share locker rooms and first-placed trophies. So the folks at the State House also found their way to popularize all of the books that no one knew included sexual references or other naughty bits until they were banned from school libraries. As a year passed and legislators gained some experience under their belt, their focus turned to less athletic trans bodies and toward all those mischievous trans kids going to the bathroom. Although admittedly creepy, stated one member of the Senate, he denied that the focus on gender nonconforming pee was becoming obsessive. A second legislative session ended with Iowa's governor now protected from having to pee in a stall next to a trans lady. It is unknown, however, whether the governor regrets this decision now that she is exposed to the foul bowel contents of trans men that must be emptied in a women's restroom. To each their own. Next up, parental rights, but not those parents or those rights. As concern grew over all of the crimes that had never been committed and the threat that transgender kids pose to a fragile cisgender economy and education system, a new tactic was devised to put a stop to the queer madness, block their access to medical care. Healing practitioners were told to cease all gender-affirming care and to replace it with gender-negating loathing. Providers were given 6 months to seek care conversion therapy to develop their aversion to their patients. As an aside, most of these conversion therapy programs failed, and physicians found themselves still caring, even if from across state lines. Many kids with privileged parents or both moved to other states. Those with less resources were left with no choice but to stay, tough it out, and become hardened to the new climate. One expert wonders if the obsession was unintentionally building an army of resilient transgender and non-conforming resistors. Transgender boys, girls, and every non-binary kid in between have gained mad strength and skill as they've learned to dodge the gender police. If they had nothing to fear before, the same can't be said now, that Herculean feats have been required of our kids just to survive. Remarkable strength, unstoppable power, and persevering love and forgiveness. Since the young couldn't be legislated away, the obsessive nature of the lawmakers turned the only direction left to the genital structure and reproductive capabilities of trans folks over the age of 18. Some states have suggested these topics are none of their government's business, but our leaders' unhealthy obsessions require that they get all up in our panties and briefs. It should be noted that it is believed that gender non-conforming people have reduced average lifespans due to violence and health inequities that shorten too many of our lives. But it's not enough for these legislators to let unnatural causes take their effect at age 30, 35, or an elderly 40. They intend to create further genocidal obstacles to a full life of liberty and justice. Why should aging transgender people be allowed to walk our streets safely and without incidents? These granny trannies need to be rounded up, geotagged, and cataloged before they can be released back into their natural habitat. If lawmakers get their way, a scarlet T will be marked on the birth certificate and driver's license so that all will know who is and who isn't trans. From there, access to public accommodations in gendered spaces, procedures, and rights may be denied to anyone with the mark of the T. Some of you may be wondering, why should I be concerned about this obsession? As a cisgender person, does it really affect me? The answer may not be easy to see. Discussions about defining man and woman have been convoluted and embedded in fear-based propaganda. But you might consider this. If who a person is, their very definition of self, can be codified in legislation, and with millions of ways of being narrowed down to only 2 legitimate and legally protected identities, is this the world you want to live in? And the world you want to leave for future generations? Throughout the years, definitions of what it means to be a man or a woman have changed greatly. These changes were controversial then too. Women working outside of the home, men choosing careers in teaching or gourmet cooking. Most of us today look back at that resistance to such gender expansion of norms as unfortunate. We are proud of the contributions that women make in science and law. What will our kids think of us when they look back at how definitions of gender were either walked back with their rights severely limited or expanded to include all people assigned male, female, or intersex rights at birth, regardless of the gender expression they embody at different points in their lives. Progress is the way forward, and discrimination against minorities by limiting their access to public spaces has never worked out well. So we should all care about this issue. We should all want to help Iowa's government officials redirect their energies to more healthy interests. So for the cost of just one tube of Lady Speed Stick or Old Spice deodorant, your choice, it truly makes no difference to us. Will you give money to help our state land on the right side of history?